You are sitting in front of a screen right now, and you may not fully realize it, but something in your life could shift tonight. Not because of magic or external forces, but because of something far more consequential. The possibility that you might, for the first time, honestly look inward. Perhaps you have been living in the same emotional cycle for years. Perhaps financial security feels perpetually just out of reach. Perhaps you have mistaken infatuation for lasting love, only to find yourself abandoned when the initial intensity fades. Perhaps peace, genuine, enduring inner peace, has come to feel like something reserved for others. You have tried, you have worked hard, wanted earnestly, and prayed sincerely. And yet the results remain stubbornly the same. You work, but you stay in the same place. You want, but nothing comes. And at some point, exhausted and confused, you arrive at a question that cuts to the core. Am I doing something wrong? Or is the world simply indifferent to me? That question, however painful, is actually one of the most important a person can ask, because it signals the beginning of a genuine search, but the answer is rarely found where we tend to look. We scan the horizon for opportunity, for the right relationship, for the perfect circumstances. We look outward, endlessly and hopefully, and we rarely, if ever, turn the light inward. The great insight of depth psychology, and of humanistic psychology as well, is that the patterns governing our lives are not accidents, and they are not fate. They are in large part expressions of unconscious beliefs we carry about ourselves and the world. These beliefs were formed early, in childhood, in the family home, in the accumulation of small wounds and large ones. They were shaped by what we were told and what we were shown, by what was modeled for us and what was withheld from us. They do not announce themselves. They carry no label. They simply operate, silently and continuously, beneath the surface of conscious awareness. What is not made conscious appears in our lives as fate. C.G. Jung. Read that sentence carefully. Let it settle, because it describes something profoundly true about human experience, something that most people spend their entire lives without ever fully grasping. You may consciously desire abundance while unconsciously believing, at a deep and unexamined level, that money corrupts, that people who have it are somehow morally suspect, that the pursuit of it requires a compromise of character you are not willing to make. You may long for love while carrying an equally deep and equally invisible conviction that you are not truly worthy of being chosen, that people who get close enough will eventually discover something in you that justifies their leaving. You may seek peace while an undercurrent of unearned guilt tells you that comfort is something you have not yet sufficiently earned, that rest must be deserved before it can be enjoyed. These are not exotic pathologies reserved for people with dramatic histories. They are ordinary features of the human psyche. They live in virtually everyone, in one form or another, and they are running the show, quietly, persistently, and with tremendous efficiency. While we stand outside ourselves wondering why our efforts produce so little of what we most want, I think of a woman, let us call her Ice, who came to me carrying exactly this contradiction. She was 32 years old, hardworking, sincere in her desire to build a better life. She had been in the same professional position, earning the same income, for years. She prayed for change, she planned for change, she worked for change, she persisted through disappointment after disappointment, and still, nothing shifted. When she came to me, she said what so many people say, "I want this so much. I do everything right. Why doesn't it come?" I asked her a simple question. What do you genuinely think about people who have achieved financial success? Not what you are supposed to think. What do you actually think when no one is watching your reaction? She paused, a long pause. Then quietly and a little reluctantly, she said, "Honestly, most of them seem to have cut corners somewhere. Or they got lucky in ways I didn't. Or they stopped caring about other people somewhere along the way." There it was, the thing beneath the thing. Her conscious mind was reaching earnestly for abundance, while her unconscious mind was broadcasting, every single day, the message that abundance is morally dangerous, that to want it seriously is to become someone she does not respect. The two were fundamentally at odds, and when the conscious and unconscious selves are in conflict, the unconscious wins. Not sometimes, always. It is simply more powerful, more persistent, and far more deeply rooted. This is not mysticism. This is not the law of attraction or cosmic vibration or the universe reading your frequency. This is psychology. Specifically, it is the psychology of self-sabotage, which is one of the most well-documented phenomena in the entire field. We undermine what we consciously want when we unconsciously believe we should not have it, or cannot have it, or do not deserve it, or that having it would make us into someone we fear becoming. Isa did not need a ritual. She did not need to burn a piece of paper at midnight or repeat affirmations into a candle flame. She needed awareness. She needed to see, with genuine clarity, the belief she had been carrying, to examine where it came from, to understand why it had once made sense, and to consciously decide whether she still wanted to organize her life around it. That moment of honest recognition, uncomfortable, unglamorous, and entirely internal, was the real turning point. Several weeks later, she wrote to me. A professional opportunity had found her, one she had not sought. The salary was substantially better. What struck her most was that she had not applied. They had come to her. This is how it tends to work, not because the universe rewarded her virtue, but because she had stopped unconsciously closing doors that her conscious self was trying to open. When the inner resistance clears, the outer life has room to move. To understand why this happens, it helps to engage seriously with one of the most penetrating ideas in the history of psychology. Carl Jung, working in the early 20th century, identified what he called the shadow, a concept so useful and so widely misunderstood that it is worth taking some time with here. The shadow is not, as popular culture sometimes renders it, a repository of evil. It is simply the repository of everything we have not looked at. Everything we have rejected, denied, suppressed, or simply never brought into the light of conscious examination. The parts of ourselves we are ashamed of. The emotions we consider unacceptable. The desires we have judged too dangerous to acknowledge. The beliefs we absorbed so early that we have never thought to question them. The shadow is not evil. It is simply unexamined. And the great paradox at the heart of Jungian psychology is this. What we refuse to look at does not disappear. It grows stronger. It gains influence precisely in proportion to our refusal to acknowledge it. What we will not integrate continues to shape our behavior, without our awareness, without our consent, and entirely beyond our conscious control. This is why willpower alone so rarely produces lasting change. You can consciously commit, with complete sincerity, to a new behavior or a new way of being, and the shadow will quietly dismantle it because it operates at a level deeper than conscious intention. You cannot override what you have not first examined. If you want love but carry an unacknowledged terror of abandonment, perhaps formed in early childhood, perhaps reinforced by later losses, that fear will express itself in your relationships in ways you may not even recognize. You may push people away before they can leave. You may choose unavailable partners, unconsciously ensuring that the relationship cannot become close enough to be truly threatening. You may interpret ordinary moments of distance as confirmation of your deepest fear. All of this happens below the threshold of conscious awareness, and all of it produces the same result. The love you most want remains perpetually out of reach. If you want financial security but harbor a deep unconscious belief in your own unworthiness, perhaps absorbed from a parent who struggled and modeled scarcity as destiny, perhaps formed in response to early experiences of being told you are not enough, you will find subtle and not so subtle ways to undermine your own advancement. You will hesitate at precisely the moments that require boldness. You will undercharge for your work, underestimate your value, and unconsciously engineer situations that confirm what you already believe about yourself. If you seek peace but are silently flooded with unprocessed guilt, for choices made or unmade, for people failed or lost, for a version of yourself you have never fully forgiven, the tranquility you crave will remain permanently just beyond your reach. Not because peace is unavailable to you, but because some part of you is still arguing that you have not yet earned the right to it. None of this is your fault in the ordinary sense of that phrase. These patterns were largely formed before you had the cognitive capacity to evaluate them, let alone resist them. Your parents transmitted their own unexamined beliefs to you, not out of malice, but out of the simple human limitation of not knowing what they did not know. Their parents did the same to them. We are all, in this sense, the inheritors of wounds we did not choose and did not deserve. The transmission was not intentional, but it was real, and it is consequential. What is also real, and equally consequential, is this. Once you see it, you have a choice. Awareness creates the possibility of freedom. This is the animating conviction of humanistic psychology, that human beings are not simply the products of their conditioning, not simply the sum of what was done to them and taught to them, but agents of their own becoming, genuinely capable of growth, genuinely capable of revising the stories they have inherited and choosing new ones. The work I am about to describe is not a magical ritual. It does not depend on the position of the moon, the time of night, or the burning of paper. It is a structured practice of honest self-inquiry, the kind of inner work that has been at the center of serious psychological and philosophical traditions for centuries, because it works. It takes courage, because looking clearly at oneself is genuinely difficult. Most of us have spent years developing elaborate strategies for not doing exactly this, but it is also the most direct path to the change you have been seeking. Find a quiet time, free from distraction, a space where you will not be interrupted, where you can be genuinely present with yourself. This work does not require candles or ceremony. It requires honesty. Take a piece of paper and write down the area of your life that feels most persistently stuck. Perhaps it is financial. Perhaps it is relational. Perhaps it is your sense of purpose, or your capacity for genuine rest. Whatever has remained most stubbornly resistant to your conscious efforts, that is where the shadow is most active, and that is where this inquiry begins. At the top of the page, write this question: why do I believe I cannot have this? Then wait. Do not analyze. Do not edit. Do not craft a response that reflects well on you. Simply wait for what surfaces first, and write it down exactly as it comes, without censorship and without judgment. The first uncensored response is almost always the most honest, because it rises from below the level of conscious self-management. It comes from the part of you that has been quietly running the show. What surfaces may surprise you, it may disturb you, it may feel disproportionate or irrational. That is a sign you are getting somewhere. A man I once worked with asked himself why he believed he could not achieve financial stability, and what surfaced was an image of his father. A man who had worked hard his entire life and never gotten ahead, who had carried his financial struggle with a kind of resigned dignity that his son had unconsciously interpreted as the natural order of things. This man had spent decades reenacting his father's story without ever having chosen it. The moment he saw it, really saw it, not as an abstract idea but as a living pattern in his own life, something fundamental shifted. That is the shadow revealing itself, not as a monster, not as a dramatic revelation, simply as a pattern that once made sense in a particular context and has simply never been updated. When you have written down what surfaces, read it back. If you are able, read it aloud. And then, and this is perhaps the most important instruction, do not condemn it. Do not be ashamed of it. Do not treat it as evidence of your inadequacy. Simply acknowledge it. Say, inwardly or aloud, I see this. I understand where it came from. I accept that it has been part of me. Jung was very precise on this point. What you resist persists. The beliefs and fears we refuse to acknowledge do not weaken from neglect. They strengthen. They go underground, where they operate with even less interference from consciousness. But what you accept, truly accept, not as permanent truth, but as present reality, you can begin to work with. The belief you have uncovered is not your enemy. It is a part of you that formed under specific circumstances, trying in its own imperfect way to protect you, to prepare you, to make sense of a world that was sometimes confusing or painful or unjust. Its strategy may be badly outdated. Its effects may be working directly against what you most want. But its original intention was not malicious. It deserves understanding, not warfare. You cannot integrate what you are at war with. Compassion toward the parts of ourselves we least like is not weakness. It is the precondition for genuine change. Once you have acknowledged what you found, write below it, I am now choosing a different belief. And then write what that belief is. Not as a wish, not as a hope, not as something you are asking the universe to deliver, but as a present tense statement of the person you are in the process of becoming. Not, I wish I could attract financial stability, but I am someone who creates financial stability. Not, I hope someday to find love, but I am someone capable of giving and receiving love fully. Not, I want to feel at peace, but I am someone who deserves peace and is learning to inhabit it. The difference between these formulations is not merely linguistic, it is psychological, and it is significant. Wishing and hoping locate the desired thing outside yourself, in some future contingent on forces you do not control. Claiming locates it inside yourself as an expression of who you are becoming. The unconscious does not primarily respond to desire, it responds to identity. When you tell it what you want, it notes the gap between wanting and having and often reinforces it. When you tell it who you are, it begins to organize your perception, your choices, and your behavior around that identity. This is not the law of attraction. This is cognitive psychology, and it is well supported by decades of research. The unconscious mind is not transformed in a single session. This is important to understand, because many people do genuine inner work once, feel a shift, expect the shift to be permanent and comprehensive, and then feel betrayed when the old patterns resurface. The unconscious is shaped through repetition, through consistent, patient, deliberate reorientation over time. Neurologically, we are talking about the gradual strengthening of new pathways and the gradual weakening of old ones. This takes time. It takes return visits. It takes the willingness to notice when the old belief resurfaces, not with self-condemnation, but with the same calm acknowledgement you brought to it the first time, and to consciously choose the new one again. Revisit this practice not just tonight, but across the coming weeks. Each time you return, you are doing something real at the level of neural architecture. You are displacing old conditioning with something more consciously chosen. The results will not be immediate and they will not be dramatic. They will be gradual and, for a time, barely perceptible. And then one day you will notice that something has shifted in how you respond to an opportunity, in how you interpret a moment of closeness, in how you feel when you allow yourself to rest. Growth works the way a garden works. You plant, you tend, you wait. And then, with no particular announcement, the green shoots appear. Jung proposed something even more expansive that is worth considering here. He suggested that we are not merely shaped by our individual unconscious, but by what he called the collective unconscious. The accumulated psychological inheritance of all human experience, the reservoir of patterns and fears and archetypal stories that have been repeated across cultures and across millennia. Within this collective layer live what he called archetypes, universal configurations of experience, the hero, the shadow, the great mother, the trickster, that appear across every culture precisely because they reflect something fundamental about what it is to be human. The relevance of this for our purposes is this. Many of the beliefs that limit us are not simply personal. They are transgenerational. They have been passed down through families, reinforced by cultures, encoded in the stories a society tells about what is possible and for whom. The association between money and moral compromise, between visibility and danger, between vulnerability and punishment. These have been reinforced not just in our individual histories, but across generations of human experience. When we do this inner work, we are not only revising our private psychological story, we are, in a small but genuinely real way, interrupting a transmission that has been running for a very long time. What you integrate, you do not pass on. The wounds you illuminate in yourself do not have to become your children's inheritance. This is one of the most profound forms of service a human being can offer, not just to themselves, but to the people who will come after them. Jung wrote, "He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakes." For years, perhaps for most of your life, you have been looking outside, waiting for the right circumstances to arrive, waiting for the right person, the right opportunity, the right moment when everything would finally align and you could begin living the life you wanted. But the pattern that keeps you where you are is not outside you. It is not in your circumstances, your luck, your timing, or the indifference of the world. It is inside, in the accumulated sediment of old beliefs, old fears, old stories that were absorbed before you were old enough to choose them and have simply never been examined.